Most watches are sold on aspiration, and here's what I mean. Put a famous name on the dial, run enough advertising, and the watch sells. Whether it can actually perform under pressure gets discovered after the fact. The luxury watch industry has been running that playbook for decades, and honestly, it works beautifully. But is that fair to you? This is why this video is different. I have got 7 watches, each built around a different philosophy of reliability. Some are expensive, some not. None of them are that famous for their marketing. The most reliable watch on this list isn't made in Switzerland, and the story of why it exists might be the most compelling case for reliability I've ever heard. Let's begin. 7 Bangalore Watch Company. Mach 1. Pilot watches are a crowded category. The aviation heritage play is familiar. A brand claims some connection to flight, bolts a large crown on a round case, and calls it an instrument watch. Most of them are instruments in the same way a decorative compass is an instrument. The Mach 1 is built differently, and the reason comes down to where Bangalore Watch Company sits in the market. BWC is a young Indian brand. They cannot afford a reputation for failure. There is no half-century of brand equity to absorb a bad batch of movements or a run of case seal problems. One wave of forum reports about accuracy issues or crown failures, and a small brand at this price point doesn't recover. This is not a cynical observation. It is a structural fact that forces a discipline that larger brands can afford to skip. They chose the Sellita SW2001 as their movement. This is the right choice for this argument. The SW2001 has been manufactured in enormous quantities, each unit following the same tolerances that have been refined across millions of examples. It beats at 28,800 vibrations per hour, offers 38 hours of power reserve, hacks for setting, and wins manually. It is not exotic. It is not proprietary. It is serviceable by any qualified watchmaker on Earth, in any city where watches exist, for a modest fee. When you buy a watch with an obscure in-house movement, you are betting that the brand will still support that caliber in 20 years. When you buy a watch with the SW2001, you are buying a movement that has already proven it can outlast brands that used it. BWC regulates their examples tightly. Tighter, in fact, than many brands at higher price points who are less motivated by necessity. The movement is accompanied by a case inspired by instruments inside a cockpit, not referencing aviation as a lifestyle cue, but as an actual design language. The Mach 1 isn't dressed as a pilot watch. It was engineered to look like something a pilot would need. Under $1,000, SW2001 inside, built by a team with no margin for failure. There is an additional angle worth sitting with. The Sellita SW2001 isn't just a reliable movement in isolation. It's reliable because it is literally identical to millions of other examples being worn right now. When you send a watch with an obscure, proprietary caliber for service, the watchmaker opens the case back and confronts something they haven't seen before. They order parts. They wait. They apologize. When you send a watch with the SW2001 to any competent watchmaker anywhere in the world, they recognize it before the case back is fully off. Parts are on the shelf. Service is done in days. The Mach 1 is choosing universality as a reliability feature. And it's the right choice. This is not the most technically impressive watch on this list. It is the one where the economics of reliability align most perfectly. The incentive structure around the Mach 1 demands it works. And it does. This watch makes their parts for necessity and universality. The next watch makes it from obsession. And that's not all. It has been solving a problem that most dive watch brands don't even admit they have. 6 Yema Superman 500. The dive watch category has a dirty secret that almost nobody talks about at retail. The bezel can move. On most dive watches, the unidirectional rotating bezel is held in position by a click mechanism and friction. It takes genuine force to rotate, but it doesn't take much less to accidentally shift it against a sleeve edge, a wetsuit cuff, a door frame, or a gym bag. The safety purpose of the unidirectional bezel is to ensure you can never accidentally extend your calculated dive time. Move the bezel the wrong way while underwater, and you might think you have more bottom time than you do. This is not a hypothetical concern. Dive watch designers have known about it since the 60s. Yema knew about it in 1963. They patented a bezel lock system that year and have been refining it ever since. The Superman 500's bezel lock is a mechanical failsafe. The bezel cannot rotate at all unless the lock is deliberately disengaged. This is a fundamentally different approach to the problem, and it is one of the most genuinely reliable design decisions in dive watch history. The 500 in the name stands for 500 meters of water resistance, delivered in a 13mm slim case, which means you are not wearing a hockey puck to demonstrate you could theoretically dive to the ocean floor. The movement inside is Yama's own CMM point, 10 inches house caliber. Yama spent 3 years refining this movement before the Superman 500 reached the market. The service architecture was designed intentionally, not as a technical afterthought, to avoid the servicing bottleneck problem that kills small independent brands. When a watch needs service, the owner needs options. Yama built a movement that their own service team can handle efficiently, without the long turnaround times that haunt smaller caliber developers. The bezel lock story deserves one more beat, because it's been largely ignored. Rolex filed patents on a bezel lock concept. Omega has explored similar ideas. Neither implemented a lock as mechanical and definitive as the Yama system that has been standard on the Superman since 1963. A 60-year-old design decision by a French brand that most people outside Europe haven't heard of turns out to be more thorough than anything the industry giants eventually produced. There is a reliability argument that goes beyond movement choice. It is about the watch being designed to not fail at the task it claims to perform. The Yama Superman 500's bezel will not accidentally shift underwater. Full stop. Picture the scenario the bezel lock was designed for. You're 40 feet down. Your dive computer is strapped to one arm, your buddy is on the other side. You check elapsed time, and you notice the bezel has shifted 3 minutes. You can't tell if it moved now or 20 minutes ago. You don't know if you have more bottom time than you think, or less. That scenario is the scenario that dive watch designers have been working around for 60 years, mostly by making the bezel stiffer. Yama removed the scenario entirely in 1963. That is the reliability move. Yama is French engineering finding a mechanical failsafe from 1963. Next is from a German city you know, and a watch that solved a problem about scratch resistance more completely than anyone expected. 5. Damasco DS30. Let's talk about why watches scratch and what Damasco did about it. Standard watch case, steel, 316L stainless, sits at around 200 on the Vickers hardness scale. This is the material that holds the movement, protects the dial, wears against your sleeve and your desk and your luggage for the rest of your life. At 200 Vickers, it scratches from contact with any sufficiently hard surface. Keys, coins, a stainless steel sink. The watch that shipped in pristine condition develops micro scratches within weeks. By the second year, the case tells the story of everything you've done while wearing it. For some buyers, that patina is the point. For others, it is a constant low-level irritation. Damasco is a German manufacturer founded by Konrad Damasco in 1994 with one primary purpose: solving the hardness problem through the entire structure of the watch, not just at the surface. The DS30's case is made from German submarine steel, the same alloy specification used in the construction of German naval submarines, sourced from the same steel suppliers. The case manufacturer stamps the lug between the lugs with the initials of the steel supplier. The alloy is inherently corrosion-resistant, naturally amagnetic, and harder throughout than conventional 316L. The surface is then hardened further using Damasco's proprietary process, bringing the outer hardness to a level that is meaningfully more resistant to the microscratching that haunts standard cases. The practical result is pretty clear. Owners consistently report that a DS30 worn daily for years shows almost none of the fine scratching that accumulates on steel watches of any other brand. The dial crosshairs, the bead-blasted finish, the patented crown system, which includes a permanently lubricated seal housing designed to prevent the gaskets from drying out over decades of use. Gasket failure is one of the most common long-term reliability problems in dive watches. Damasco addressed it architecturally. The movement is a Sellita SW200 with a silicon escape wheel. The silicon component reduces friction and eliminates the need for lubrication on that specific gear-train interaction, extending the effective service interval. At under 10 mm thick, the DS30 disappears under a shirt cuff. For a German tool watch built on submarine steel with a patented crown system, that profile is genuinely unexpected. The DS30 is the entry point into the Damasco catalog. The more expensive models add full-depth ice hardening to 60 Rockwell C across the entire case thickness, a level of hardness that puts the steel closer to industrial tooling than watchmaking steel. The DS30 is surface-hardened rather than through-hardened. This distinction matters, and it is worth understanding before buying. But even at the entry level, the scratch resistance in real-world use is in a different category from anything else at the price. There is a collector on one of the major watch forums who documented 2 years of daily wear on his DS30. Construction work, travel, cooking. The watch photographed after 24 months of that showed the bezel edge and case flanks in essentially the same condition as day one. He added a note, "This is the first watch I've owned where I stopped thinking about the watch." That last sentence is the whole reliability argument distilled to 8 words. When a watch becomes transparent, it has achieved what reliability actually means in practice. German obsession with material science. What's next takes a completely different route. The reliability doesn't come from the case, it comes from making a deliberate choice about what goes inside. 4. Baltic Aquascaphe. There is a school of thought in watchmaking that the most reliable watch is the one with the fewest ways to fail. Baltic is a French brand that has been praised extensively for its design language. The clean dial, the vintage diver aesthetic, the restrained color choices that read as considered rather than calculated. That praise is earned. But the reliability story of the Aquascaphe is less about what it looks like and more about 2 specific decisions Baltic made about what goes inside and what they chose to leave out. Movement first. The Aquascaphe runs the Miyota 9039. Not the 8 series Miyota you'll find in a lot of entry-level watches. The 9 series is Miyota's premium automatic tier, beating at 28,800 vibrations per hour, competing directly with Swiss ETA 2824 on performance specifications. Miyota is a subsidiary of Citizen, which means the movement is backed by the engineering depth of one of the world's largest watch manufacturers. Parts are available everywhere. Any trained watchmaker can service it. The 9039's track record in watches that have been worn hard for years is documented extensively across the collector community. It simply runs, absorbs life's minor abuses, and keeps time without complaint. The second decision is the absence of a date complication. This is worth pausing on, because it sounds like an omission, but it is a structural reliability choice. The date mechanism is, by a wide margin, the most common source of mechanical failure in automatic watches. The date wheel, the quick-set mechanism, the finger that drives it forward each night. These are the parts that wear first, that bind, that cause the movement to struggle. Remove the date, and you have removed the most common point of failure. The Aquascaphe has no date. This is not an oversight. It is the watch saying, "I will not need to be fixed for the things that usually need fixing." Beautiful French assembly, a proven Japanese premium movement, no date complications, 200 meters of water resistance, under $800. The Aquascaphe is what happens when a brand thinks about reliability as a design principle rather than a marketing claim. Every decision in the watch's construction points toward the same outcome. The watch works, without interruption, for a very long time. There is a comparison worth making to illustrate why the date decision matters more than it sounds. A Rolex Datejust, one of the most expensive and famous automatic watches in the world, comes in regularly for service with date mechanism problems. The date finger wears, the wheel develops resistance, the quick-set mechanism starts to drag. None of this is a criticism of Rolex. It is just what date mechanisms eventually do. Baltic looked at that and said, "We are not including the part that breaks." Some buyers see this as a limitation. Experienced watch owners recognize it as a promise. The most reliable machine is usually the simplest one. Baltic understood this and built a dive watch around it. This watch has proved that less is more, done properly. What's next didn't remove anything. It added something nobody else thought to include. 3. Muhle Glashütte, A.R. Rescue Timer. Thilo Muhle did not design this watch. The German Maritime Search and Rescue Service did. Muhle Glashütte has been the official watchmaker for the DGZRS, the volunteer rescue service operating on the North and Baltic Seas since 2001. These are not professional divers in controlled conditions. These are volunteers launching into North Sea weather in the middle of the night, hauling people off sinking vessels, working in conditions where getting the watch wrong is genuinely consequential. The DGZRS crews wore watches on those rescues. They destroyed them. They came back with a list of requirements. No sharp edges. The case needed to be completely radiused and smooth, not for aesthetics, but because sharp case edges injure people during rescue operations in tight spaces. The crystal needed to be nearly indestructible. Most watch crystals run 1.5 millimeters thick. The S.A.R. Rescue Timer's sapphire crystal is 4 millimeters. The rescue crew, during early testing on a working rescue ship in heavy seas, essentially could not break it. The loom needed to be readable instantly in complete darkness. The movement needed to function accurately after violent physical shock. That last requirement produced something genuinely unusual: the patented woodpecker neck regulation. Standard movement regulation uses a regulator to adjust timekeeping by altering the effective length of the balance spring. This system is accurate but vulnerable to shock. A hard impact can shift the regulator and degrade accuracy permanently. Mueller's woodpecker neck design uses a forked spring mechanism that physically locks the regulator under shock, preventing it from shifting. When the shock passes, the regulator returns to its set position. The movement continues to keep time. This is a patented solution to a real problem, developed for people whose profession creates that problem repeatedly. The base movement is a modified Sellita SW2001, Mueller's own rotor, their own finishing, adjusted to between 0 and +8 seconds per day. Mueller modifies and adjusts the movement in Glashütte, which means you get the reliability of a proven Swiss base with the regulation precision of a dedicated watchmaker who has a specific accuracy target to meet. Water resistance is 1,000 meters. The rubber bezel functions as a shock absorber for the steel case, designed to deflect impact rather than transmit it to the movement. Case edges, fully smooth, radius throughout. The crown is screwed down at 4 o'clock, positioned deliberately to make accidental displacement nearly impossible. This is not a watch designed by someone who thought about reliability. It is a watch designed by the people who needed it most. Thilo Mueller has spoken about early testing sessions on working rescue ships in heavy North Sea weather. The conditions were severe enough that most watches brought for comparison were damaged within the first few hours. The SAR prototype, with the rubber bezel absorbing impacts against equipment. The 4 mm crystal refusing to crack, the woodpecker neck holding its rate through the shock of hitting a wall in heavy swell, kept running. These are not laboratory simulations. This is a watch that has been tested in the environment it was designed for, by the people whose lives depend on it, and been approved. The DGZRS does not approve things charitably. At $2,400, the SAR Rescue Timer asks you to pay for what the watch actually does, rather than what the brand is named. For that price, you get a watch that was developed with maritime rescue volunteers, built to survive the conditions they work in, and adjusted by a movement specialist in Glashütte to keep accurate time in the middle of that. Most watches are tested and approved. The SAR Rescue Timer was designed in the field, by the people in the field, for the conditions in the field. That process produces a different kind of watch. Engineered for rescuers. What's next is more philosophical. A watch where the reliability comes not from materials or mechanisms, but from the hands that put it together. 2. The Japanese sleeper. Kurono Tokyo, Bunkyo, Tokyo. Hajime Asaoka is one of the most technically accomplished independent watchmakers working today. His personal commissions, watches he builds entirely himself, by hand, including the movements, sell for prices that place them beyond the reach of most collectors who follow his work. For years, his craft was something you could admire at a distance and never touch. In 2019, Asaoka started Kurono Tokyo to address this exactly. The Bunkyo Tokyo, named for the neighborhood in Tokyo where Asaoka's studio is located, uses a Miyota 90 S5 movement. This is the same category of choice as the Aquascafe's Miyota 9039. It is a proven, serviceable Japanese premium automatic that any watchmaker anywhere can work on for a modest fee. Asaoka has spoken about this choice directly on Kurono's website. The 90S5 sits in Miyota's premium range, was designed as a direct alternative to the ETA 2824, and has been rebuilt to exceed Swiss movement implementation standards. It is not a compromise. It is a deliberate decision to keep the watch serviceable by its owner, in their city, at a price that doesn't make the service cost comparable to buying the watch again. What Asaoka poured his energy into is everything else. The dials on Kurono watches are produced to a rejection rate that is extreme even by Japanese watchmaking standards. Some dial variants have a 5% pass rate, meaning 95 out of every 100 dials made are rejected before they ever see a case. Asaoka personally oversees this process. The case geometry is polished by hand. The hands are individually bent to match the contour of the dial and crystal. Each watch is inspected by Asaoka before it ships, not by a team, by him. The reliability argument for the Bunkyo Tokyo is different from every other entry on this list. It isn't about the hardness of the steel, or the architecture of the movement, or the thickness of the crystal. It is about what happens when a master craftsman applies grandmaster level scrutiny to the assembly of a watch that costs under $2,000. The movement will run. Any watchmaker in the world can service it. But the level of care applied to everything around the movement means the watch lands in your hands as precisely as anything being produced anywhere. Sells out within minutes of every release. Secondary market prices run above retail. Not because of marketing, because people who own one won't give it up. Here is the thing about Asaoka's QC process that separates it from the word quality control, as most brands use the term. Most QC is about rejecting pieces that fall below a threshold. Asaoka's process is about building until a piece reaches a standard, and stopping everyone who doesn't reach it. The 5% dial pass rate is the visible version of this. Every component in the watch went through the same filter before assembly. You are not buying a watch that passed a test, you are buying a watch that was allowed to exist. The serviceable Miyota 90S5 inside means that decades from now, when the watch needs attention, the person servicing it does not need to contact Japan, order proprietary parts, or charge you a premium for knowing a rare caliber. Asaoka spent his energy on the things that would never need fixing. Asaoka built Kurono to give people access to what he actually knows about making a watch. What he knows turns out to be more than any price tag communicates. A master's eye on an accessible movement. Number one is where everything, materials, science, movement choice, engineering philosophy, and mechanical purpose converges in one watch. Before we move on to the next part, let me tell you this. Most people don't realize this, but buying a watch the wrong way can cost you thousands, and you won't even notice it until it's too late. You walk into a store or browse online, and everything looks the same, but behind the scenes, there's a system. Prices aren't always fair, availability is controlled, and one bad decision can leave you overpaying for something that doesn't even hold its value. That's why I created a complete free insider guide to buying watches. Inside, you'll find the best watches to buy, the watches to avoid, and how to choose a watch that actually fits your style and budget long term. The goal is simple. I'll help you stop guessing and start buying smart. You'll find the free guide in the pinned comment and description. Now, let's move on to the next part. 1. San Martin SN 012 1 Titanium. Before dismissing this entry, sit with the number first. $400, that's what this watch costs, give or take. For a grade 5 titanium watch with an NH35 movement, assembled to tolerances that have embarrassed reviewers who expected something else entirely. San Martin began, as a lot of Chinese microbrands begin, as a homage producer, paying tribute to the designs of watches they admired, at prices that put those aesthetics within reach. That phase of the brand is genuinely behind them. Over the last several years, San Martin has been investing in metallurgy and finishing at a level that has drawn the attention of collectors who arrived skeptical and left surprised. The SN0121 uses grade 5 titanium. This is worth explaining. Grade 2 titanium is commercially pure. It is clean, lightweight, with the soft gray quality that Tudor chose for the Pelagos 39. Grade 5 is a titanium aluminum vanadium alloy, harder than Grade 2, more scratch-resistant, and the material used in aerospace structural components, biomedical implants, and high-performance sporting equipment. San Martin chose it not because it was the available option, but because it was the better option. The finishing on the case, brushed flanks, polished bevels, is executed to a standard that several reviewers have noted exceeds what you typically find from brands charging 3 to 4 times the price. The NH35 movement is the engine in this argument, and it deserves its reputation. Seiko's NH35 is, by any practical measure, one of the most extensively validated automatic movements ever mass-produced. It beats at 21,600 vibrations per hour, lower frequency than 28,800, which means slightly less precision but greater durability and significantly longer intervals between services. It winds automatically and manually. It hacks. It does not break. The caliber runs in everything from entry-level Seiko automatics to watches that field test in Antarctic conditions. There is no documented failure mode that the NH35 exhibits with any regularity. It simply runs indefinitely until it needs cleaning, at which point any watchmaker anywhere will quote you a service cost that is a small fraction of what the watch costs new. The "cry never" phrase in your brief for this watch earns its place here. This is the watch where the financial argument for reliability is completely closed. The total lifetime ownership cost, purchase price plus services over 20 years, will be lower than the service interval cost alone on most Swiss automatics. You are not paying for heritage or prestige or a name that carries meaning at a dinner table. You are paying for an extremely well-made tool that will keep working for the rest of your life. 10 years from now, a San Martin SN0121 bought today will still be running. The NH35 will get its service when needed for $50 to $100 at any competent watchmaker in the world. The Grade 5 case will show less wear than a steel case bought at the same time. The watch will not have required a conversation with a brand's service department, a waiting period, or a bill that requires preparation. This is what reliability actually looks like when the financial layer is stripped away from the prestige layer. One more thing. The NH35 doesn't just run. It runs in conditions that mechanical watches are not supposed to survive routinely. There are documented cases of NH35 powered watches being forgotten in the back of drawers for years, wound once, and running perfectly. The caliber requires clean oil to perform optimally and benefits from a service every 5 to 7 years, but the consequences of skipping that service are not catastrophic. The watch degrades gracefully. It doesn't stop suddenly. It drifts a little, tells you it's time for attention, and continues running while you arrange it. That is a different failure mode than the one that greets you when a more complex mechanism is neglected. The most reliable watch is the one that keeps working without requiring special handling. The San Martin SN0121 is that watch, at a price that makes the reliability almost irrelevant to argue about because the cost of being wrong is nothing. 7 watches, 5 countries. Prices range from $400 to $2,400. The pattern is the same across all of them. Reliability is a design choice that has to be made before the watch is built, not a quality that emerges from spending more money. The Match one is reliable because BWC couldn't afford it not to be. The Yema locked its bezel in 1963 because someone understood the real-world failure mode. Damasco hardened their steel because scratching is a solved problem if you care enough to solve it. Baltic removed the date because the date breaks first. Moulet built to the requirements of people who depend on watches in ways that make failure unacceptable. Asaoka applies his best judgment to every piece because that is what he knows how to do. San Martin chose the better titanium and the most proven movement because they were engineering the watch, not marketing it. None of these watches are famous for their advertising. Buy once, cry never isn't a tagline. It's an engineering brief. These 7 brands took it seriously.